My name is Brianna Mercer, and I spent 32 years growing up in a strictly patriarchal family. 3 weeks ago, after my parents passed away, my brother forced me out of our family home. He looked directly at me and said, "Dad made his decision a long time ago. Sons inherit everything. Daughters receive nothing. That's how it's always worked in this family, and that's how it will continue." Then he changed the locks on the house where I was raised. It was the same house where I spent 2 years caring for our dying mother, while my brother visited only 3 times. The house where I sat beside her during chemotherapy, while he checked his Rolex and complained about traffic. He threw my belongings onto the lawn and told me I was nothing but a burden. In my father's view, that was all a daughter could ever be. What my brother didn't know was this. My mother had spent 8 years preparing for this exact outcome. 8 years of private meetings with attorneys. 8 years building something he could never access. Before I explain what happened during the will reading, take a moment to like and subscribe if this story connects with you. Let me know where you're watching from and your local time in the comments. Now I'll explain how a daughter labeled worthless ended up with everything. To understand my brother's actions, you need to understand the Mercer family. My father, Robert Mercer, lived by one firm belief. Sons carry on the family legacy, while daughters marry and fade into someone else's name. He wasn't openly cruel, he simply distributed his attention based on that belief. He was a successful contractor, able to buy a 4-bedroom colonial in suburban Connecticut. It was a nice area, good schools, and a garage workshop where he spent weekends with Marcus, teaching him construction skills, while I helped my mother in the kitchen. My mother, Linda, was the quiet anchor of our household. She maintained a lavender garden in the backyard every morning. She had a way of softening my father's harsher traits, making his dismissals feel less deliberate. Marcus, 6 years older than me, absorbed my father's values without question. When he graduated, Dad paid for his business degree at UConn. When Marcus wanted to enter real estate, Dad introduced him to every contractor and developer he knew. When I said I wanted to attend nursing school, Dad replied, "Girls don't need expensive educations. You'll get married anyway." So I earned scholarships, worked double shifts at a diner, and paid my own tuition. That was 8 years ago. I remember my mother pulling me aside after another dinner where Dad praised Marcus's first major sale while barely acknowledging my acceptance letter. "I've taken care of you," she whispered, squeezing my hand. "You won't understand yet, but I have." At the time, I thought it was just reassurance. I didn't know she had spent that afternoon meeting with a lawyer named Evelyn Cole, signing documents that would later change everything. 2 years ago, my mother was diagnosed with stage 3 breast cancer. I was working the night shift at Maplewood Senior Living when my phone buzzed with my father's number. He never called me at work. He rarely called at all. "Your mother is sick," he said. "You need to come home." Not "we need you," just "you," as if it had always been my responsibility. I moved back within a week. I switched to night shifts so I could care for her during the day. Chemotherapy appointments, radiation treatments, and the steady decline that cancer brings. My income dropped by 20%, but that didn't matter. She was my mother. Marcus visited 3 times in 2 years. Each visit lasted less than an hour. He arrived in designer suits, kissed her forehead, checked his watch, and left. His wife, Victoria, came once. She spent the visit photographing the house for memories while barely acknowledging my mother. My father never commented on my efforts. In his mind, this was simply a daughter's role. My mother understood differently. She began meeting with someone once a month, a lawyer, she said, for insurance matters. I drove her to an office in Hartford, waited in the car, and drove her home. She always seemed lighter afterward, as if she had finally put something down. One night, as I helped her into bed, she said, "You're a good girl. No matter what happens, remember this. You showed up. That matters more than people realize." I assumed she was referring to her illness. She wasn't. Marcus and Victoria lived in Greenwich, in a 5-bedroom home in an area where even the mailboxes looked expensive. Victoria called herself a socialite, which appeared to mean attending gallery events and posting designer purchases online. When she looked at me, it wasn't with judgment, it was as if I didn't exist. I wasn't family, I was background. At Thanksgiving, 2 years ago, the last one Mom was well enough to cook, Victoria asked, "Have you ever considered a career with more growth? You can't care for elderly people forever." My mother's hand tightened around her fork. "I'm a registered nurse," I replied calmly. "I help people." Victoria laughed politely and dismissed the comment. Later that night, I went to the kitchen for water and overheard Marcus and Victoria talking. "Don't worry about her," Marcus said. "Dad promised everything to me years ago. She's just here to play nurse until Mom's gone." Victoria whispered back, "Good, we need this. We really need this." I stood there, frozen. Something felt wrong. The urgency in her voice didn't match their lifestyle. I told myself it didn't matter. I was wrong. 6 weeks ago, my mother was declared cancer-free. I cried in the oncologist's office. 2 years of fear, and she had survived. We celebrated with lunch and her first glass of champagne since treatment began. She wanted to visit her mother at the assisted living facility. 4 weeks ago, my parents finally made the trip. They never returned. A truck driver fell asleep on I-95. The police said it was instant. I was working the night shift when I received the call. I remember sitting on a stairwell floor and unable to breathe. I don't remember driving home. I remember the scent of lavender when I arrived and realizing she would never tend her garden again. The funeral was held 4 days later. Marcus gave the eulogy. He spoke about our father for 7 minutes and mentioned my mother twice. Before the reception ended, Marcus pulled me aside and told me we needed to discuss the house. The flowers were still fresh when he told me I had 1 week to leave. He said, "Dad made it clear. The house is mine." I reminded him the will hadn't been read yet. He dismissed that as a formality. He told me I should be grateful. He said caring for Mom was my choice and not his responsibility. Then he walked away. He didn't wait a week. 2 days later, I came home to find the locks changed. My belongings were boxed and stacked outside. Rain had soaked through several boxes. My nursing diploma was damaged. Through the window, I saw Victoria drinking wine and laughing. She noticed me, raised her glass, and walked away. Marcus told me I had 24 hours to remove my things. I sat in the grass, holding my mother's watch, when I found her letter. Inside, she wrote that she had seen everything, that she couldn't change my father, but she could protect me. She told me to contact Evelyn Cole. I stayed with my mentor, Diane Foster, who offered me a place without hesitation. That night, I read the letter again and made the call. Evelyn Cole greeted me warmly. She said she had worked with my mother for 8 years. My mother had planned carefully, knowing exactly how this would unfold. She explained that arrangements existed outside my father's estate, arrangements Marcus knew nothing about. She asked me to wait until the formal will reading, to say nothing, to sign nothing. When I asked why, she simply said, "Because your mother is about to have the final word." 3 days before the will reading, Marcus called. He sounded friendly. He said he wanted peace. He offered me $10,000 if I signed away my right to contest the estate. I listened in silence. And that's where the story truly began. $10,000 for a lifetime of being treated as lesser, for 2 years of caring for our mother while he showed up 3 times. For every dismissal, every quiet insult, every moment Marcus and my father made me feel like I was occupying space meant for someone more deserving. "Brianna, be realistic," Marcus said. "You're not going to gain anything in probate. Dad's will is clear. All you'll do is waste money on lawyers and drag this out for months. Take the money. Start over." "No, Marcus," I replied. "I'll see you at the will reading." His tone hardened immediately. "You're making a mistake. You understand that, right? You're going to walk out of that room with nothing, less than nothing, and you'll regret turning this down." "Then that will be my decision," I said. Fine, he snapped. Just remember, I tried to be generous. Whatever happens next is on you. The call ended. I set my phone down with unsteady hands and did exactly what Evelyn advised. I waited. I want to pause here and ask something. Have you ever felt pressured by family to sign something, told that you had no right to question what was fair? That sense of powerlessness stays with you. If this story feels familiar, leave a comment. I read every one. And if you haven't subscribed yet, now might be the moment, because what happened next at the will reading changed everything. The will reading was scheduled for 2 p.m. on a Thursday at Harrison and Cole. The conference room featured a long mahogany table that could seat 12, though only 6 of us were present: Marcus, Victoria, myself, Evelyn Cole, her assistant serving as witness, and, much to Marcus's surprise, my grandmother, Eleanor. Marcus's smile faltered when she entered. "I didn't know you'd be here." Eleanor Whitfield was 82 years old and sharper than most people half her age. She wore a navy dress, her silver hair neatly pinned, and the sapphire ring she'd worn for decades caught the light as she took the seat beside me. "I was asked to attend," she said calmly, "by my daughter." Marcus and Victoria exchanged looks. "Well," Marcus said, regaining his composure, "the more the merrier, I suppose. Though I don't see why we need to complicate this. Dad's wishes were clear." Evelyn took her place at the head of the table, folders arranged precisely. "Before we begin," she said, "I should note that 2 wills will be read today, Robert Mercer and Linda Mercer's. They are separate documents with separate provisions." "2 wills?" Victoria frowned. "Why would that matter? Everything was jointly owned." "Not everything," Evelyn replied evenly. I felt my grandmother's hand close around mine beneath the table. Marcus adjusted his Rolex. "Fine, let's proceed. Read Dad's will first." Evelyn opened the first folder. "Last will and testament of Robert Allen Mercer, dated 14 months ago, witnessed and notarized in Hartford County." The room fell silent. Robert's will unfolded exactly as Marcus expected. Evelyn reviewed the standard clauses before reaching asset distribution. "To my son, Marcus Robert Mercer, I leave 70% of my personal assets, including my vehicle, workshop tools, and my share of all jointly held financial accounts." Marcus nodded, satisfaction settling in. "To my daughter, Brianna Lynn Mercer, I leave 30% of my remaining personal assets." 30% of what's left, Victoria murmured quietly. "Basically nothing." "That's not," I began. "It's fine," Marcus interrupted, now magnanimous. "Dad had about 80,000 in accounts. You'll get something, maybe 24,000 after everything's settled." He smiled as if doing me a favor. "More than I expected Dad to leave you." "Brianna," my grandmother said softly, "perhaps you could allow the attorney to finish." "What's left?" He leaned back. "The house was Dad's, the money was Dad's. I'm the primary heir. Brianna gets a consolation prize. That's generous." Victoria pulled out her phone, already disengaged. "Actually," Evelyn said, cutting through his confidence, "there is more to address. Robert's will represents only a portion of your parents' combined estate." "Combined?" Marcus's certainty wavered. Evelyn closed the first folder and opened the second. "Your mother's estate is separate and substantially larger." The room went still. Marcus stopped smiling. "That's not possible," he said. "Mom didn't have an estate. She was a housewife. Everything came from Dad." "That is incorrect," Evelyn replied calmly. "I know my family," Marcus said, standing. "Whatever savings she had doesn't change anything. Dad made his intentions clear. Sons inherit, daughters accept what they're given." He turned to me, hostility returning. "This is what I tried to protect you from, sitting here hoping Mom left you something. Jewelry, recipe cards, none of it matters." "Marcus," my grandmother warned. He ignored her. "I hope you enjoy being homeless. I made sure you have nothing to fall back on." "Mr. Mercer,"
Evelyn said firmly. "Sit down." The command caught him off guard. He complied. "This is a legal proceeding. Your mother's will contains provisions that override your assumptions. Interrupt again, and you will receive the remainder in writing." Victoria whispered urgently to Marcus as he leaned back, tense. Evelyn opened the second folder. "We now turn to Linda Mercer's estate, including a section she specifically asked to be read aloud." For a brief moment, doubt crept in. Marcus's words echoed. What if he was right? What if this was only comfort from a mother who knew how this would end? I looked at the Timex watch on my wrist, worn leather, scratched face. She wore it every day. She could have afforded better. I knew that now. Victoria whispered, "Probably just insurance, nothing that changes anything." "Our situation?" I thought. My grandmother squeezed my hand again. "Your mother was the smartest woman I ever raised," she whispered. "Trust her." I met Evelyn's gaze. "I'm ready." "Ready for disappointment," Marcus muttered. Evelyn ignored him. She removed several documents, seals and notarizations visible. "Last will and testament of Linda Eleanor Mercer," she began. "Updated 18 months ago, witnessed and notarized in Hartford County. The testator was evaluated by Dr. Sarah Hammond, board-certified psychiatrist, and declared fully competent." Marcus objected. "That was during chemo. Her judgment—" "I anticipated that," Evelyn replied, "which is why I have written confirmation and video documentation." She placed a USB drive on the table. "Your mother recorded herself explaining every decision. She wanted no uncertainty." The room fell silent as the weight of that settled in. "Wishes to challenge her competency?" Victoria's phone stopped moving. She stared at the USB drive as if it might react on its own. Marcus swallowed. "That's very thorough." "Your mother was a careful woman," Evelyn replied, a slight curve at the edge of her lips. "Now, the letter." She lifted a single handwritten page on cream-colored stationery. I recognized it immediately. Mom kept a box of that paper in her desk, the kind she reserved for matters that truly mattered. "To my children," Evelyn read, her voice steady. "If you are hearing this letter, then I am gone, and the moment I feared has arrived." My throat tightened. "I love you both, and I want that known first, but love does not blind me." Marcus went completely still. "For 35 years, I watched your father favor Marcus in ways he never acknowledged as favoritism. It was simply how he viewed the world. Sons mattered, daughters served. I could not change him. I tried." Evelyn paused and looked up. "There is more, but we can stop if anyone needs a moment." "Keep reading," Marcus said sharply. Evelyn continued, and it felt as though my mother's voice filled the room. "When Brianna was born, Robert said, 'Maybe next time we'll have another boy.' I held my daughter and promised she would never be next time to me. I watched her grow up working twice as hard for half the recognition. I watched her pay her own way through nursing school, while Marcus was given every advantage. I watched her come home to care for me during the hardest 2 years of my life. She changed my sheets when I was too sick to move. She held my hand during chemotherapy. She sang the songs I once sang to her. Marcus visited 3 times in 2 years. Evelyn's voice remained calm. "I do not write this to condemn my son, but to explain my decisions. What I leave Brianna is not a reward. It is not favoritism. It is balance for what I could not give her while alive. It is what she was always owed." Victoria made a small, strained sound. "If Marcus feels anger hearing this, I understand, but I ask him to consider why he feels entitled to everything. Who taught him that, and what did he do to earn it beyond being born male?" Marcus's face drained of color. Evelyn finished, "Brianna, my darling girl, you were never a burden. You are my heart. Live well, be happy, and never let anyone convince you that you don't deserve good things. With all my love, always, Mom." The room fell silent. I couldn't speak. I couldn't breathe. Grandma pressed a tissue into my hand. "Now," Evelyn said gently, "we'll review what your mother left." She removed another document. "First, the house." Marcus straightened. That belongs to Dad. It was always in his name. Actually, it did not, Evelyn replied, sliding the paper across the table. 5 years ago, your parents transferred ownership. The property at 127 Maple Drive was placed solely in Linda Mercer's name. Marcus grabbed the document. Why would Dad agree to that? For liability protection. Your father was facing a potential lawsuit. Transferring the property protected it. The case settled, but the deed remained unchanged. She produced another record. This is the recorded deed from Hartford County. The home, valued at approximately $650,000, belonged exclusively to your mother. Victoria's expression shifted. That means your mother had full authority to leave it as she wished. She looked at me. And she left it to you, Brianna. Marcus shook his head. No, Dad would never— Your father believed what suited him, Grandma said sharply. Linda told him the transfer was temporary. He never verified otherwise. I stared at the signature on the page. The house was mine. It had been the entire time. Additionally, Evelyn continued, there is the irrevocable trust. The what? Marcus said faintly. 8 years ago, your mother established an irrevocable trust with Brianna as sole beneficiary. Once created, it cannot be altered without her consent and exists outside probate. Marcus turned to Grandma. You funded this. I gave my daughter money that was mine, she replied evenly. The trust was funded with $400,000, Evelyn confirmed. Invested conservatively, current value is approximately $1.2 million. Victoria gasped. That amount is correct. Because the funds were separate property, the trust was never part of the marital estate. It has always belonged to Brianna. I couldn't absorb the number. My mother, who wore a Timex and grew vegetables, had quietly done this for me. This is fraud, Marcus protested. Your father's awareness is irrelevant. The funds were never his. She continued. One final asset remains. Marcus looked unwell. Your mother held a life insurance policy valued at $500,000. The sole beneficiary was Brianna Lynn Mercer. I hadn't known. None of it. She purchased it 12 years ago and paid premiums with funds gifted by her mother. Your father was never listed. But I'm her son, Marcus said, desperation breaking through. You did not leave you nothing, Evelyn replied, producing another page. You receive her personal effects, jewelry, photographs, and a letter written specifically to you. A letter, Marcus said hollowly. She leaves Brianna millions and gives me a letter. I want what I earned, he said suddenly, striking the table. What you earned? I spoke before stopping myself. You visited her 3 times in 2 years. What did you earn? He stared at me. This is contested, Marcus said, rising. Evelyn remained seated. Your mother was evaluated and found competent. The signing was recorded. The trust and insurance bypass probate. You have no standing to contest them. Grandma spoke quietly. She did this because without protection, Brianna would have received nothing. Victoria stood abruptly. This is insane. She's a nurse and she gets millions? And you're about to lose your house, Grandma said calmly. We know about the failed investments. Marcus went pale. You planned to take everything, I said slowly, because you were drowning. I had a setback, he snapped. A setback this estate was meant to fix, I replied. Victoria collapsed into her chair. You were told your whole life you deserved everything, and you never questioned it. Evelyn summarized the totals. House, $650,000. Trust, $1,200,000. Life insurance, $500,000. Father's estate share, $24,000. Total, approximately $2.374 million. The number hung in the air. Marcus gripped the table, then collapsed. Paramedics arrived. He had fainted, nothing serious. Later, pale and shaken, he looked at me. "You knew." "I didn't," I said honestly. "I only knew she loved me." His laugh was hollow. "She didn't love me." "I think she did," I said quietly, "but she also saw who you became." Victoria tightened her grip on his shoulder, and for the first time the room was silent for reasons no one could argue with.
"We should leave. We need to figure things out." "Figure out what?" His voice wavered. "How to pay the mortgage? How to explain to the bank that we're not receiving anything?" He looked at me with what could only be described as desperation. "Brianna, you have to help me. We're family." The word lingered in the air. Family. 3 visits in 2 years? You're just dead weight. Enjoy being homeless. "Marcus," I said, "you forced me out of my own house before our mother's flowers had even wilted. You told me I was nothing but a burden. You tried to pressure me into signing away everything for $10,000. I stood up. "I'm not going to pretend that didn't happen." "You have to understand," Marcus said, his voice growing louder. "I was under stress, the investments, the pressure. I didn't mean most of what I said. That's not who I really am." "Then who are you, Marcus?" I asked quietly. "Because I've known you for 28 years, and I've never seen proof of anyone different." He recoiled slightly. "I'm not going to let my brother become homeless," I said. "I'm not cruel, but I'm also not going to rescue you from decisions you made while treating me as if I had no value." "So what now?" he asked. "You walk away with millions and I get nothing." "You get exactly what you earned." I picked up my bag, the same worn leather bag I carried through nursing school, through 2 years of night shifts, through every moment my family dismissed me. "You get the consequences of your choices, just as I'm finally receiving the consequences of mine." Victoria began to speak, but I raised my hand. "If you need to contact me, go through Evelyn, but any personal relationship between us?" I looked at my brother, the person I grew up with, who once held my hand on our first day of school and who had become someone I barely recognized. "That will take time, a lot of time, and honestly, I don't know if it will ever happen." "Brianna, I'm not doing this to hurt you." My voice remained steady. "I'm doing this because I finally understand what Mom tried to teach me. I don't have to accept treatment I wouldn't give to someone else." I walked toward the door. "Mom loved you," I said without turning around, "but she loved me enough to protect me from you. That's the difference." I didn't wait for a response. Grandma followed me into the hallway. "Wait," she said, touching my arm. "I have something for you." She reached into her purse and pulled out a small navy blue velvet box, softened at the corners from years of use. "Your mother wanted you to have this. She asked me to give it to you after the reading." Inside was her sapphire ring, the one Grandma had worn for as long as I could remember, the one I admired as a child. "Grandma, I can't. This is yours." "It was mine," she said gently. "I gave it to your mother on her wedding day. She gave it back to me when she knew she was dying so I could give it to you when the time was right." I slipped it onto my finger. It fit perfectly. "There's something else you should know," Grandma said. "Something your mother didn't include in the will." I looked up. "Linda wanted to leave your father years before you were born, but then she became pregnant with Marcus, and she stayed. She stayed for you children. I had never known. No one had. She did the best she could, but she always regretted that she couldn't give you a different childhood." Grandma's eyes filled, though no tears fell. "The trust, the insurance, everything. It was her way of giving you the freedom she never had, the freedom to walk away from people who don't value you." I hugged her, this small woman who had worked with my mother for 8 years to protect my future. "Thank you," I whispered. "Don't thank me, just live well. That's all your mother ever wanted." Behind us, Marcus and Victoria finally left, their voices low and strained. I didn't turn around.
1 month later, I sat in the office of a financial advisor in Hartford, someone Evelyn recommended. She had 20 years of experience and no interest in profiting from my inexperience. "Here's my recommendation," she said, sliding a document toward me. "We keep the trust invested and withdraw only what you need for living expenses. The life insurance goes into a high-yield savings account for emergencies and opportunities. We pay off your student loans immediately, about $42,000, and you keep working." Keep working? I
You
expected
love
advice
your
about
job, she
retiring
said
or
simply.
traveling.
Money shouldn't change who you are. It should give you options. So that's what I did. I paid off the loans I'd been chipping away at for 6 years, gone in one transaction. I stayed at Maplewood, switching to day shifts now that I didn't need the night differential. I lived with Diane for another month while I figured out what to do about the house. The house was complicated. It was where I cared for Mom, where I'd been thrown out, where Marcus and Victoria drank wine while my belongings sat in the rain. It was also where Mom grew lavender, tucked me in at night, and quietly built a future I never knew existed. I wasn't ready to live there. Not yet. And I wasn't ready to sell it either. "Rent it," Diane suggested one evening. "Let it support itself while you decide. There's no rush." She was right. For the first time in my life, there wasn't any urgency. Mom had given me that. 3 months after the will reading, Grandma called with news. Marcus had sold the Greenwich house. Victoria filed for divorce last week. I was at work, sitting in the same stairwell where I once learned our parents were gone. Strange how places collect memories. "How do you know?" His listing appeared on Zillow, and Victoria's Instagram is very revealing. Grandma's tone was dry. "She's already presenting herself as a survivor of narcissistic financial abuse." Her words. I almost laughed. "Is he okay?" "Define okay," Grandma sighed. "He's in an apartment in Bridgeport, still in real estate, but not with his old firm, and I don't think he's attending any Greenwich cocktail parties anymore." The version of me from 3 months earlier might have felt satisfaction. The version I was now just felt tired. "I don't wish him harm," I said. "I know," Grandma replied. "That's the difference between you and him." Did Mom know about the debt? She suspected. That's partly why she planned everything the way she did. She knew that if money was available, Marcus would find a way to take it, not out of cruelty, but because he was raised to believe it was his. I thought about my brother alone in that apartment, his marriage gone, his image shattered. I remembered the boy who once carried me on his shoulders. I didn't know where that boy went, but I knew I couldn't save him. "I'm going to the house this weekend," I told Grandma. "Do you want company?" "Yes, I do." The lavender garden survived the winter, partially. Some plants were brittle, but new green shoots were breaking through the soil. Life, persistent and unyielding. Grandma stood beside me. "She planted this garden the year you were born. Did you know that?" I didn't. She said lavender was for protection. She wanted good things to grow around you. I unlocked the back door. The key worked perfectly. The locks had been changed weeks earlier. I stood in the kitchen where I made countless cups of tea for Mom, where I held her hand through fear and nausea. The house was quiet. Marcus left it mostly clean, either out of guilt or haste. Mom's things remained: her recipe cards, her glasses, her robe. In her bedroom, I found a small photo album. Inside were pictures of me from infancy to adulthood. On the first page, in her writing, "For my bravest girl." Grandma sat beside me. She worked on that during chemo, she said. It was her way of counting the good things. I held the album and cried, not from grief, but from gratitude. 6 months later, I enrolled in a nurse practitioner program. It had always been a dream, but financial limits made it unreachable. Now, following my advisor's plan, I used trust funds for tuition while the rest continued to grow. I worked part-time at Maplewood and moved into an apartment with Diane near the hospital. We grew lavender on the balcony. Grandma called every Sunday, telling stories about Mom before life wore her down. I recorded them.
I rented the house to a young family, a nurse from Maplewood and her husband. Their daughter asked to care for the lavender. I said yes. I said yes to many things that year, to rest, to opportunity, to the understanding that I was always enough. My mother didn't give me money. She gave me permission. I've thought a lot about why Marcus became who he is, not to excuse him, but to understand. Entitlement isn't innate, it's taught, and once learned, it's hard to unlearn because it requires dismantling identity. Marcus isn't a villain, he's the result of a system that told him he deserved more simply for existing. When reality corrected that belief, he didn't know how to respond. Whether he changes isn't my responsibility. My responsibility is to live the life my mother wanted for me, to set boundaries, to protect my peace, and to understand that walking away from harmful people isn't cruelty, it's survival. If you're watching this and you've been told you weren't enough by people who should have loved you, they were wrong. You were always enough. Sometimes love protects us in ways we don't immediately see, and sometimes we have to become our own protectors. That's what my mother taught me. If this story resonated with you, share your thoughts in the comments, and if you want more stories like this, check the links below. Thank you for staying until the end. It truly means more than you know.